I just watched the explosive first two episodes of Marry My Husband starring my fave Korean actress, Park Min-young. I have to talk to you about my first impressions of this webtoon turned very juicy K-drama. Hi, I'm Monique. I am the host of Off by Purple Heart podcast, where I talk to you about K-dramas, C-dramas, BTS, and whatever else I'm going to talk about. Today's episode, I'm going to talk about Marry My Husband. This is a webtoon turned K-drama, and it stars Park Min-young, like I said in the show open, and I have been wanting a project for her to be like a knockout hit. The last drama I remember watching her in was Forecasting for Love and Weather. I believe that was the show title. And it also starred one of my other favorite K-drama actors, Song Kang. Unfortunately, that drama in itself, I don't think it served either one of them. But this one is definitely packing some heat. I hear that the webtoon this is based off of is very, very good. And I actually might read the webtoon for this, because I like to read the tie-ins and to see how much the live adaptation changes from the webtoon. I will say right off the bat, for first impressions for the first episode, this was explosive. I kind of teased this in my 10 most anticipated K-dramas for 2024. I was completely beside myself for the first episode. It is brutal, but it does an amazing job of setting up the stage for the main characters and getting you to root for Park Min-young's female lead character. In this drama, it starts off very similarly to My Perfect Revenge Marriage, where you're seeing the female lead being kicked around in life. She is diagnosed with cancer. I believe it's a gastric cancer, something with the GI system, and she is married to one hell of an SOB, like awful man. And I should warn you, trigger warning for the first episode, there are some scenes with domestic violence. They're short, but they're very impactful, and there's one scene in particular that's just gruesome, which I will get into shortly. Anyway, she has a awful husband, just a disgusting mother-in-law who essentially dotes on her son. This is typically the archetype that you see in a lot of K-dramas, with the mom completely doting on the son. The son is like a worthless, good-for-nothing bum and basically mooching off of his wife, while the wife is the head of the home and does essentially everything. We also are introduced to her best friend, who is also a piece of shit. Sorry. And she is extremely manipulative and is kind of playing as both the really sympathetic best friend, but is slowly plotting on her because she's jealous of her and her success. And in the first opening scenes, you see her basically coming to the end of her life, and she is absolutely understandably miserable fighting this cancer treatments, and the payments are not going through, and then she's potentially going to get kicked out from the hospital for not getting treatments. So she ends up getting into this taxi car to kind of drive back home to see what's going on with the payments and to confront her husband. Gets into a taxi, and she is kind of weary because the taxi driver is really nosy for some reason, has taken a real special interest in her, kind of asking her about her life and what's going on, and she essentially tells him that she wants to die. She's absolutely miserable and nothing is kind of turning out the way that she wants to. And he does the usual spiel of, oh, don't talk like that, there's so much to live for in the life, and you know that it's kind of going in one ear and out the other. She's like, yeah, BS. But she's being nice enough to this older man, and suddenly he takes like a sharp U-turn and goes through a tunnel, and this is where the fantasy element kind of kicks in a little bit. And on the other side of the tunnel, he gives her a dollar note. He gives her money, and specifically one of the notes, there is like a little heart drawn on it, and we're to find out later on in the episode that that's something that her deceased father used to do for her. So she gets out of the cab after being given this money, climbed up the stairs to her apartment complex condo, and she is struggling. Remember, she has cancer, she's undergoing chemo treatment, and it is one hell of a struggle for her to get up those stairs, but she does it. Opens the door and just happens to notice that the high-heeled shoes of her best friend is right at the door along with her husband's. So red flag number one. She goes through the living room and she overhears a conversation that they're having, and they're being as disgusting as you can imagine. And the best friend is talking about her insurance policy, and the husband basically alludes to the fact that she's dying soon and he's going to cash out on that life insurance and get the best friend a really nice like Chanel bag. And you just see like her entire world just turn in. Park Min Young does such a fantastic job in this because you can feel the tension in her body, and you can just see just everything just kind of crash down in her facial expressions. She confronts them violently. She starts throwing, and then this is where some of the DV starts to get played, and he tosses her around a little bit, and the best friend is being disgusting again because she's a piece of shit. And she's crying and she's just at the end of her rope, and then her husband pushes her into a glass coffee table and I guess severs her spine. And in the last moments you see her on the floor bleeding out, like there's like a pool of blood underneath her head. And honestly, my breath was taken away. Like I was so gagged. I was like, what the? I was like, holy shit. I was like, oh my God, they did such a great job with the first episode of setting everything up. And then she wakes back up, and she's now in the year 2013. So the show was taking place in 2023, present day along with us, and she shot back into 2013. And everything just goes into complete utter chaos. So she's back in office at her work, and then you see all the characters that are going to be fleshing out as far as the secondary and tertiary characters. She has a super disgusting, misogynistic boss, makes comments about women's looks, enjoys having the attention of younger female co-workers like her disgusting best friend. And we meet also a general manager that's kind of underneath this disgusting leech of a supervisor. And we also meet like another young coworker that will eventually become her friend, that we get to see a little bit more of in episode 2. Anyways, there's like a big confrontation because she's like transported into the past. She's not really sure what the hell's going on. This is where the whole magical fantasy element comes in. She's freaking the hell out, and a lot of things take place. Her then boyfriend, in present day husband, basically grabs her and is being really physically aggressive with her. They have this huge fight, and she starts falling, tripping and falling, hyperventilating, going to like a panic attack. And then the CEO of the company that she works for eventually follows her out because she ends up making a run for it after all sorts of chaos erupt, and she crashes into like a bunch of desks and basically anything that's within her visual field she ends up crashing into. Like she basically falls over herself. And normally I'm really aggravated with the trope of the female lead being extraordinarily clumsy and that her love interest is like the one that saves the day. But the CEO, Mr. Yu, I understand in this circumstance why they had him save her as much as he did, because she falls a lot. But considering everything that has transpired in this episode, I give a lot of grace for that. And they have a really fantastic meeting, and he gives her money and basically says, yeah, go home and kind of de-stress yourself. She goes home with the money that he's given her, gives her a jacket, is like the dashing, man, and she starts concocting a plan on how she's going to fix her life because she is given like a second chance at life, which is why this is how it's like very reminiscent of My Perfect Revenge Marriage, but it's definitely a lot darker. One of the things that if I was transported in the past and I had access to all the information I have in the future, would be anything that's dealing with stocks, knowing that I could make a shit ton of money before like big conglomerates like Apple and Google and Microsoft and everything like that comes into play. Like I'm going to be investing in all that. So she starts concocting a plan, investing some money, because now she knows I cannot marry this man. I have to get out of this I have to get out of this relationship. So she starts concocting a plan. But because her piece of shit boyfriend at the time just can't let shit go, they end up having another meeting, and it's very frightening and very scary. He asks her to go out for dinner, and she essentially lays down the law and says, yeah, I want to break up with you. Let's just end this relationship. And he's not taking that because he's an abusive SOB. So they comes to blows again, and he's grabbing her and he's screaming in her face, and honestly your heart starts pounding. The actor's doing like a phenomenal job in being like a scary psychopath, and Park Min Young of course is like acting her ass off in this, and she's getting more and more distressed, and he's just getting right in her face. So she starts screaming for help. Help comes by, and then the police kick in, and because the police are always useless, they essentially hand wave it, and they're like, oh, you're just being sensitive, you're being just overly emotional, da 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 da, you know, the usual spiel. And she's like, what, so I can only report to you when I'm broken? So do I have to come up here with like bruises and basically on death's door for you to take my complaint seriously? And she essentially says, fine, whatever. And we pretty much finish off episode 1 in that sense. Episode 2, I haven't completely finished it, but I've gotten at least 40 minutes into it. It takes a little bit of a lighter tone than episode 1. I'll say out of the two, I actually preferred episode 1 because episode 1 just has so much action and tension, and you just feel like your blood's boiling for the female lead character. Episode 2 kind of takes it down a notch, but we're introduced more to the players that are in the office, like the female manager, for example, who we are kind of told as the audience that she herself has had like domestic violence in her own personal life as well. We meet a potential friend character who can basically edge out her manipulative best friend that just seems to want to undercut her at every single way. And we get introduced a little bit more to Mr. Yu, the CEO, who will be, I'm assuming, the eventual love interest. The episode 2 definitely takes a lighter tone. I feel like they just wanted the audience to kind of take a breath from everything that you get from episode 1. But even still, there's just so much meat to chew in this show. And I like that, for one, the female manager that is in the office happens to see like a little dispute between her and her boyfriend, the eventual husband. He is obviously trying to talk to her, and he's becoming increasingly more and more aggressive because she's avoiding him now because of the whole altercation that they had prior to her calling the cops. And he leads her into like a supply closet, and he's like physically forcing himself on her. So definitely keep in mind of trigger warnings. He's forcing himself on her, and this manager happens to swoop in at the last minute and kind of saves her. And she has that like in the back of her mind that this woman is really a loyal worker, but she keeps getting undercut by the supervisor in their office because he's a piece of shit, misogynistic, disgusting, also really lazy and entitled. And she kind of comes up with a plan to propose or to put together this proposal that could help, you know, forward her career and also help out this manager. This female manager that's in the office space too. Also in the second episode, you start to see her concoct her revenge against her best friend, and she also starts to learn the rules of engagement as far as how this whole time travel aspect works. So in the universe of this show in particular, the events that have happened in her life leading up to 2023 still have to transpire, but not necessarily her. So there's a couple of instances where she has some near misses where she gets brutally like injured, like she runs into like a courier, runs into a desk or something and has bruising. There is an instance where like a hot coffee pot kind of falls off of a desk, and initially in the first timeline hits her and actually ends up scarring her forearm, whereas in this new timeline, Mr. Yu, the CEO, was able to kind of save her, and the scarring ends up on his wrist. So she starts to figure out, while all the events that played out in her previous life have to come to pass, she doesn't necessarily have to be the player in that event. So the plan starts to form that maybe I can find a way to engineer that the best friend that's manipulative ends up marrying the boyfriend, husband to be instead. And that's pretty much where we're leaving off in episode 2. I just have maybe about 15 minutes left of episode 2 to unveil. So I can tell you, as far as first impressions, I'm impressed with the show a lot. I think it's really exciting. I think it's engaging. I think it takes everything from Perfect Revenge Marriage and makes it even that much better. For me, Perfect Revenge Marriage, while good, it kind of lost some steam for me towards the final like few episodes. Yet I still enjoyed like a huge bulk of it. Definitely the first episodes. And this show takes a similar beat where, you know, we go from the future to the past, and the characters already start to notice how different the main player has changed. But I like in this one that she can't necessarily undo the events that are supposed to transpire, but the caveat, the plot hole, or not necessarily the plot hole, but the thing that kind of saves her a little bit is that she can maybe get other people to endure the fate that she had.